Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Tuesday, January 21st, and obviously, we got a national championship to talk about. Ohio State beats Notre Dame 34-23 with a little bit of dramatics at the end that probably were a little bit unnecessary for the Buckeyes, but they get the win nonetheless, and Ryan Day becomes a national title head coach. Definitely a lot of people deleting some tweets about Ryan Day right about now. Then we'll get into a little bit of talk about where they go from now. Obviously, 2025 will be a year of change for both these teams in a lot of different ways. We'll break down what that year should hold for both these teams, and the standard has been set. You're going to have to find your way back to the CFP if you want a successful season. Then we'll get to some superlatives for the entire CFP. The toughest one to pick was the moment of the CFP because of that play that happened yesterday, but I like the pick that I have on that. Then we'll get to an all-CFP team, obviously going to be dominated by the Buckeyes, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And then we'll finish it off. I'll give you my top 10 teams in the last ranking for this year. I'll give you my top 10 teams as I see it as we wrap up the 24-25 season. But going to be a remarkable show. But before we jump in, do want to remind you guys we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $sign, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be interactive, so utilize that whenever you can. But let's go ahead and jump in here and let's talk about Ohio State. They won the national championship yesterday, and it was a really good one. It did not look like it was going to be a really good one around halftime, and then Notre Dame decided to do what Notre Dame has done really the entire year and fight their tails off for the entire four quarters. Really gave Ohio State everything they could handle, but it opened very cleanly for Notre Dame in this one. We'll go quarter by quarter, make this a little bit easier to digest, but for Notre Dame, started absolutely picture perfect. 18 plays, 75 yards, and a score, multiple fourth down conversions. The one issue with that was Riley Leonard carried the ball 9 times for 34 yards, went to the sideline after that drive and threw up pretty quickly. So the question started to begin of how healthy is he? Is he going to be able to keep up this pace of 9 carries in a drive and get your team down the field in almost 10 minutes? Is he going to be able to keep that up for the entire game? It was very obvious that he was not going to be able to, but Ohio State returned the favor pretty quickly. They were knocking on the door to start the second quarter, and then Jeremiah Smith takes it in to start the second quarter. The QB run game really was a huge part of this game, really throughout, and early on it definitely showed itself very, very quickly. In the second quarter, this was all Ohio State. This was really when Ohio State kind of won a national title in a lot of different ways, where they scored that on that second play with Jeremiah Smith on an 11-play drive, got a punt from Notre Dame, a big-time holding call, which the first time that's happened since September for Ohio State, so kind of insane that unfolded. But then they went on another 10-play drive, got another score. Quinshon Judkins gets into the end zone, and a lot of people have some questions. Notre Dame gets stuffed. Riley Leonard looks a little bit gimpy, starts to look a little bit like those runs are really kind of taking a toll on him. And then Ohio State goes 12 more plays, goes down and scores with 27 seconds left in the first half. They outgain them 169-3 in the second quarter of this one, and Ohio State takes full control going into halftime of this game. They're up 28-7. Everyone's looking around just wondering if Riley Leonard and this Notre Dame team would have any answer. And overall, in the first half, it was Will Howard. He was not being denied early in this game. In the first half, went 14 for 15, 144 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, added 26 rushing yards, and just looked like a guy on a mission. Was perfect on third down, 6 for 6, made some huge throws, including some huge catches, including one from Brendan Ennis that was absolutely massive. 4.8 yards per rush in this one penalty at halftime. They were playing really, really good football. Now, Notre Dame was playing more than fine, but we're 2-6 on third down, had a couple of penalties, and you give an opening like that to an Ohio State team like this, they're going to take full advantage of that, and they really did in this game. Really remarkable second quarter, and then it made way for a second half that got a little bit crazy, and the third quarter was kind of the start of that. And now Ohio State did open that thing up with a chunk run from Quinshon Judkins for about what looked like 70 yards. I didn't know exactly what the number is, but got up by 24 pretty quickly early on in the second half, got a quick field goal, and this thing looked entirely out of reach. Then Notre Dame started to grind their way back. They got a big-time 34-yard touchdown pass to Jaden Greathouse, who was just incredible in this game and will be someone to watch possibly for the portal, but sounds like he loves Notre Dame. I don't expect him to move, but definitely a lot of teams calling him right about now, I'd have to imagine. But they got that, and they got the two-point conversion to cut it 16. Ohio State starts rolling right back down the field with an R.J. Oben penalty that looked to be an absolutely massive one that could have buried them going into the fourth quarter. And then a lot of stuff happened. Then you did have the fumble by Emeka Egbuka that opened the door for Notre Dame. A great play by Drake Bowen on that one. Ran him down and made an awesome punch on the ball. And then they come right down the field and they settle for a field goal and they miss. And frankly, they got what they deserved on that one. You're down 16 points with about 9 minutes left in the game. You have to go for the touchdown. One way or the other, you're going to have to score 2 touchdowns, and you're not going to have too much time to do it. Now, Notre Dame did get a couple of chances to try to tie this thing, so maybe it wasn't all that crazy at the time, but you look back at it, and there's a lot of different questions of if they go for it, even if they don't get it. They're pinning them, or they ended up pinning him anyway with the missed field goal, but at the end of the day, even if you don't get it, you're in the same exact position that you were anyway, and you're probably in a position where at the very least you're getting 2 more possessions and you have that shot that you ended up having anyway. Notre Dame continued to hang around, 16 points with about 5 minutes left, and then Jaden Greathouse made a really ridiculous play on a touchdown to cut the lead to 10. 2-point conversion from Jeremiah Love made it 8, that was a double reverse pass from Jordan Faison, but really remarkable play from Notre Dame down the stretch of this game. Thing got really, really interesting. People were wondering, can Ohio State close? Is this going to be a massive, massive collapse? And then Jeremiah Smith came into the mix, and they just decided number 4's alone, let's just throw it up to him, and it worked. It was the man coverage that we've talked about really all week. It came back to bite Notre Dame in the worst possible moment, and it really did the entire game. Now, they did a really good job in the second half trying to, at the very least, kind of temper what Ohio State was doing, but overall, did a remarkable, remarkable job throughout this game. Just had that one moment with Ohio State and Jeremiah Smith, and that was going to happen, if I'm being totally honest. Jaden Fielding hits a field goal, this thing ends, and Ohio State becomes the first team to win a 12-team national championship, but remarkable game. It was absolutely incredible to watch these two teams go at it. There was a point in the middle where you're thinking, was that Ohio State-Texas game the real national championship? But then Notre Dame did what they do. They really, really fought back in this one, and you needed one big, massive play, and the best player in the game made it. Jeremiah Smith made the play that they needed, and Will Howard made a number of big-time plays in this game. But let's talk about real quickly how Will Howard and Ohio State got the win here, because there was a lot of great things happening for Ohio State, especially early in this game. But we'll start with the play-calling masterpiece. Chip Kelly and Ryan Day did incredibly well in this game. This is not a good, easy defense to find openings against, even if they're playing man coverage. It is not very easy to find openings against this group, and they were able to. Really, the entire day, were able to run the ball very effectively with different motions and things, and then Will Howard made every single throw you could possibly want him to make. Played some really, really great football, and obviously made the biggest throw when he very much needed it to Jeremiah Love. And then elite O-line play. I mean, they dominated Notre Dame in the trenches in this game in a way that not really anyone had been able to do throughout the CFP. Now, Penn State had plenty of success, but there was definitely this air of, if Notre Dame can slow down that run game, what could possibly happen in this one? And they did not do that by any means. 214 yards, 5.6 yards a clip for Ohio State in this game. Just an elite performance from a group that was all over the place throughout this year. A couple of injuries, a couple of things that really held them down, but they dominated when they very much needed to, especially in this game. Not so much in that Texas game, but plenty in this game, and really dominated the line of scrimmage. Got Ohio State what they needed, which was a run game that could help out Will Howard, who was incredible in this one. 17 for 21, 234, 2 touchdowns in. It really caps a career that, that probably should have gotten a little bit more respect before he went to Ohio State, but at the end of the day, he gets his moment in the sun. He very much deserves it. Did a ton of damage with his legs as well in this game, and was just downright remarkable all the way throughout this season. Had a couple of moments where a lot of other quarterbacks would have shrunk. A lot of other quarterbacks would have, not played their best football down the stretch of the season after the Michigan loss, after the Oregon mistake. A lot of questions would have been had for that kid, but he found a way through. He played his best football throughout these last 4 games, and he moves forward as a national champion and likely with some pretty good NFL draft prospects, which we'll talk about likely next week when we get into all that stuff. But overall, they did it. They actually did the thing. The title or bust team actually did it. They won a national title, and it's a very weird team. It was a very weird road to get here, and we'll talk about it tomorrow in a little bit more detail, just where they stack up in the world of the CFP champions, because one of the more confusing teams, if I'm being totally honest. But when they got going, they were the scariest team. They were the best team in the country. There was no question about that. And a million people questioned Ryan Day. A million people questioned if he was ever going to be able to get to this point. Now, for me, myself, not much changed about the way that I think about Ryan Day after last night. Now, obviously, he is a national champion, so I'll treat him a little bit differently going forward. But overall, he was a great coach before. You know, I said after the Michigan game they probably shouldn't fire him because you're probably not finding a better coach than him, and it's very obvious you're not. This is the second best head coach in the game as far as I'm concerned. I said it going into this one that the winner would be, and Ryan Day is very much in that group. Now, you can make the argument that he's number one, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll get into a little bit more detail about Ryan Day and his remarkable resume that he has thus far that now officially has that crowning achievement on it. But overall, the story of this could be Ryan Day, it could be Will Howard, it could be Jeremiah Smith, but it is the seniors. Let's just be totally honest. This group of guys decided to come back for that moment. They decided to come back. Jack Sawyer, JTT, Emeka Egbuka, Travion Henderson, Cody Simon, who was the defensive MVP last night, all of those guys came back for that moment. They came back for the moment to lift that national championship trophy, and yeah, it probably wasn't the perfect year. It probably wasn't the way that they imagined it in their head, where they lose to Oregon on the road in dramatic fashion. They lose to Michigan for the fourth year in a row and haven't beaten Michigan their entire careers, but they got the ultimate goal. And I think everyone understands that as big as those rivalry games are and as massive as they will be going forward, the national title is what we're playing for at the end of the day, and Ohio State was able to find a way to do it. It's a remarkable year. It's a very confusing year, and it's one that will be much talked about for quite some time to come. It gets the 12-team playoff era off on a very, very interesting foot. Obviously, the 4-team started with an Ohio State champion. The 12-team starts with an Ohio State champion as well. Remarkable game from them, and they deserve all the respect in the world for how they've played throughout the season, especially the last 4 games. But as for Notre Dame, this was not the last time you will see Notre Dame at this level. I can almost promise you that. Now, I don't know what next year will hold. We'll talk about that here in a second. There are some pretty big questions about next year as we'll get into that, but what they've done since that NIU game has been nothing short of remarkable. You know, it's very, very easy to drop another one of those games, whether it was Louisville halfway through the year, or it was USC at the very end of it, or one of these CFP games, but they kept battling. They found a way to win these games, and I expect them to be an Ohio State spot at some point with Marcus Freeman as the head coach. Remarkable job he's done this year, and they came up a little bit short of the goal, but this is a very special team that battled through some things that a lot of teams would not have been able to battle through and made some really, really incredible plays down the stretch of this season. But they come up just short. Ohio State wins the national championship, the first 12-team CFP champion, and they join themselves as the first 4-team CFP champion. But remarkable year from Ryan Day, and now we'll look forward to 2025. We'll talk a little bit about what Notre Dame and Ohio State are looking down in 2025. A lot of people walking out the door, especially on the defensive side of the ball for both these teams, and we'll talk about what that's going to look like right after this, so stick with us.